and officers to this meeting of Cabinet, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting, apart from myself, will be accessing the meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you finish speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and when necessary, will mute those not being used. I will ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to agenda business. And the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence from members and officers, and I have not received any apologies for absence. So next we will receive any declarations of a personal or prejudicial interest in accordance with the provision of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by the authority in September 2008. Do I have any declarations of interest, please? I think that Councillor Smith wanted to make a declaration.
Thank you for reminding me, Chair. Yes, I need to declare an interest. Sorry, I haven't quite got my second screen working, so I haven't got. I can't tell you the item number, but it's the item to do with governing bodies, and I declare an interest there because I'm mentioned as a governor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's item 14, appointment of local authority governors. If there are no other declarations of interest, then we will now receive for approval the minutes of the last meeting of Cabinet, which was held on the 14th of December 2021. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, that they are true and accurate record of that meeting?
Move for minutes, Leader.
I'll second, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Leader. Thank you, Councillor Patel. So everyone in agreement with those minutes? Thank you. First report we have on the agenda for today's meeting is an update on the regulations to establish corporate joint committee and the resultant proposed changes to the Cardiff Capital Region Joint Committee. And this is a report of the Chief Executive. So over to you, please, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and good afternoon. As you say, Mark Shepherd, Chief Executive. Leader, this unfortunately is quite a lengthy and complex report, which I will try and make sense of by summarising the main features. I should also point out that the same or a very similar report will be going to all 10 local authorities currently participating in the Cardiff Capital Region City deal by the end of January for reasons which are set out in the report. The main purpose of the report, as you indicated, is to update members on the statutory requirement to establish a South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee and explain how relevant functions will be transferred to the CJC from the current Cardiff Capital regional arrangements, initially with regard to the functions of economic wellbeing, transportation and strategic planning, and then finally to appraise Cabinet of the next steps in taking forward that process until the CJC is properly and formally established. If I start, I think it's probably helpful, Leader, if I just quickly reflect on the City deal. I think, unfortunately, to some extent, it's still misunderstood. Collaborative arrangements of this sort are really established because there are some things that can only be achieved at scale, and there are some things that have impact and influence beyond the individual county borough boundaries of each participating authority. And you may recall, Leader, that there was even some talk at the time when the last local government reorganisation plans were put together that one of the alternatives was for effectively local authorities to voluntarily and consciously work in a more collaborative way on those functions where that was necessary. And again, as I'll point out during the report, that isn't a threat actually to the sovereignty of the individual local authority. It's just a recognition that there are some functions that work better when organisations work together on a regional basis. Just as a reflection, as of December 2021, the City deal has approved projects of just under £200 million. The private sector leverage of that is estimated to be up to £2.5 billion over time. It's created about 7,000 new jobs, and we have a further £150 million worth of pipeline projects ready for approval. So coming back to my point about scale, really, we're talking here about large-scale projects that put in large-scale amounts of money from various sources, including most noticeably from the private sector. The impact to date as well, I think it's just worth emphasising that the approved investments of the City deal so far are pan-regional, spanning multiple industry sectors. For example, infrastructure investment projects in each of the 10 local authorities, including Metro Plus, Homes for the Region and Strategic Premises projects. Challenge fund projects, which are open to public sector organisations and private sector solution bidders, again in each of the 10 local authorities, and then very specific innovation projects which have been approved for individual organisations such as Creo Medical, Pharma Intelligence, Zipworld, the CSE Foundry with the semiconductor plant and CS Connected, and finally the graduate programme again, which stretches over all 10 local authorities. However, what I want to now talk about is the move from City deal to City region and moving the economy forward in the region. So the Corporate Joint Committee is the mechanism to support optimal delivery of what comes next and engender a more effective operating model for the region, moving from a single funding programme, the City deal money, to the capability and remit to fund and run wider programmes. But there are many challenges around this, not least at domestic UK level and with the successor EU funding arrangement requirements. Requires effective operation in new multi-level governance environments. I think the point I'd want to make here, though, Leader, is that the local authorities remain closest to the problems on the ground with their unique democratic legitimacy, and therefore the CJC operates on a no-threat basis to local services. We are talking about different things here. We're talking, as I come back to again, to doing things on a scale and at a level beyond what the local authority would achieve itself, for example, in planning terms, economic development terms, or local transport terms. So the reason for this report is to set out and seek endorsement of an interim delivery model for the South East Wales CJC, and to describe the twin track approach that will be necessary to take into running the CCR City deal alongside a bare minimum model on an interim basis. And that all has to be set out and agreed ahead of the first statutory duty of the CJC, which is to set its budget on or before the 31st of January 2022, so only a couple of weeks away. And then finally, in terms of the report, to appraise Cabinet of the next phases of progress in line with resolving the barriers that currently exist to the full implementation of the preferred lift and shift model, which is described in the report, and eventually, subject to all these outstanding financial issues being resolved, enable one coherent model of regional economic governance. Worth just probably dwelling on some background. The Welsh Government's South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee regulations came into force on the 1st of April 2021, and they require a formal corporate legal entity to be established across the 10 local authorities that constitute the Cardiff Capital Region. It's important to note that this is a legal duty that falls upon the local authorities and not upon the region. As I indicated, the first statutory duty is to set a budget on or before the 31st of January 2022. There are then a set of immediate commencement duties around the preparation of a regional transport plan, a strategic development land use plan, and a conferment of economic wellbeing powers to follow. It's always been the aim of CCR to evolve into a corporate structure and shift from being a single funding programme around City Deal to managing and overseeing multiple programmes, funds and projects as a city region. And CCR has achieved a great deal in a short space of time, but this agreement is a long-term collaborative way of working over 25 years and beyond, and is seen as a real fillip to the local business community. The core principles will be that the current model of the Cardiff Capital City Deal is constrained and has been outgrown by current practice and future ambition, so there's a need for change. Currently, we have no balance sheet or borrowing powers and can't act directly and can't acquire or hold assets, which again is a problem for the City Deal. We have complex back-to-back arrangements in place to enact key investments, and huge reliance is placed on the accountable body, and therefore change is needed. And while the principles of the existing joint working agreement will be retained and built upon, the key features moving forward will be that local authorities retain control of decision making and concurrence with their local arrangements. We will need to ensure the region has access to all investment and opportunities available to it, irrespective of where this sits. As I say, no threat to local authority services. The powers, functions and opportunities are pulled from the centre, mainly from Welsh Government, as opposed to taking them from local authorities. The local authority is still able to deal directly with Welsh Government and UK Government, as well as through the city region. And we need to work out what sits best at each of those new levels of multi-tier governance moving forward. That's national, regional and local. So I hope that explains that they're not really a threat to each other. In terms of making progress, at the Regional Cabinet meeting of the 20th of September 2021, approval was initially given for a lift and shift governance and delivery model that would see the capital region integrated within the new CJC and setting out a comprehensive transition plan to that effect. The report also set out some live risks and issues, mainly around renowned financial status issues, and a letter from the Welsh Government Minister to support the position that Welsh Government would seek to work out with the region those issues proactively and resolve them ahead of enactment. And there's a link to that Capital Region report within the report. However, in the intervening period, it's clear that those risks and issues that were identified cannot be resolved satisfactorily ahead of the budget setting that's required by the legislation on the 31st of January 2022. These mainly relate to financial status issues to do with Section 33 status and VAT, corporation tax and wider financial status issues, including access to the local government pension scheme and borrowing from the Public Loans Board. Clearly, these issues could have major ramifications for the new proposed CJC and indeed CJCs across Wales, and requires a joined approach with Welsh Government leading actually in order to convey that intent and affect the regulations. It requires applications to HMRC and HMT, and that could take time. It's estimated at least 6 months. So essentially, I suppose what all that tells you is that the initial plan and preference to go straight to a lift and shift model and directly establish the CJC with all of those powers is not possible in the timescale, and therefore an interim model is required. That interim model is set out in the report and is called the bare minimum model. So even without that lift and shift model, which of course remains the strong desire of the regional cabinet, there are still some financial VAT issues primarily for the basic operation of the CJC model. So even under that bare minimum model, there are still some potential financial risks. However, legal advice has been taken, and it states that the 10 local authorities have to individually comply with the legislation in order to be lawful. However, in doing so, local authorities can only reasonably be expected to adopt a minimally compliant model. So in effect, and being frank, we do the bare minimum to stay within the law, but until such time as we can overcome the risks and issues that I've set out, we effectively have to have a twin track approach where we continue to run with the city region and the city deal while we work through those other issues, but we have to have the CJC established in parallel in order to remain lawful. Therefore, it's recommended that as of the 31st of January 2022, we need to set that budget and the annual plan, and that CJC adopts that bare minimum approach. As I say, that will require that twin tracking, but what it will really mean is a very small nominal budget would be set, but wouldn't have to be enacted in so much as the CJC would effectively not be doing anything in addition to the city region for that interim period, and therefore it's not in our interest for it to do any more because it may be subject to irrecoverable VAT. So the immediate duties require starting the formation of a regional transport plan and SDP, but that has now, with Welsh Government permission, been pushed back to the 30th of June 2022 to allow us more time. And that interim position will allow for unresolved matters to be satisfactorily addressed at some point in 22-23, although there is provision for that bare minimum model to carry on until March 23 if that is absolutely necessary. Therefore, that first meeting of the CJC is scheduled to be on the 31st of January. Again, that will have a very basic function of setting that minimal budget, establishing a chair and vice chair, and just doing the bare minimum functions that, again, we've been advised are required in order to comply with the legislation, but recognising that the CJC does not have a direct and effective role until such time as it's properly established with the lift and shift model. So finally, Leader, in terms of next steps, it's probably just worth me rehearsing what is required. Firstly, that the city region, supported by its technical advisors, work with Welsh Government to submit a business case to HMRC in particular, and commence discussion with Her Majesty's Treasury around what is required to make the CJC workable within the South East Wales region and indeed elsewhere. That it's probably worth recognising that the risks and issues will inevitably remain around this until those issues are resolved and until we are able to transfer effectively to the new CJC arrangement. However, it's felt that these risks can be managed and mitigated through the interim bare minimum model as set out in the legal advice that we've received. We need to make clear to Welsh Government that the twin track approach is not a sustainable long-term position and is interim only. We need to continue with frequent meetings with officials and the ministerial team to drive progress and to hold Welsh Government to account. Preparations will continue in parallel for that lift and shift model, as that remains the end goal for that one integrated model of regional public investment as per other regions in the UK and indeed across the world. What I've proposed in the report ensures that all local authorities are minimally compliant and lawful, while at the same time maintaining pressure on Welsh Government and dialogue with UK Government to ensure the process remains on track. And if all of that is achieved, we are hopeful that on or before March 2023, we'll be able to formally move to the full CJC model for the functions described, and as is set out in statute by Welsh Government. So my apologies, Leader, that unfortunately it's quite a technical report, and what I didn't want to do is read verbatim the report because you've got that in front of you. But hopefully that summary allows you to understand the key issues and takes you to the recommendations as set out in paragraph 9.
Thank you for that, Chief Executive, and it is a comprehensive report, and your summary was very helpful. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. I see these as some administrative and technical measures to enable a very important regional strategic initiative to work, and I have no hesitation in moving that we adopt the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. And then we have the Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm very supportive of the proceed with caution approach until we get clarity on those certain areas, and I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Leader. I know there's reference in those recommendations to myself in consultation with the Chief Executive and the Section 151 officer, considering and setting the first budget of the CJC no later than the 31st of January. But that is obviously in my role as leader of the authorities, and if there's any interest to declare there. And I would also add that this has been subject to extensive discussion by the 10 local authorities at a regional cabinet level. And of course, as colleagues would expect, there's also been extensive discussion and engagement with Welsh Government as well, because this is in part, of course, driven by new legislation that does require collaborative working across local authorities in Wales. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I'll now receive the second report to Cabinet today, and that's a report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. And it is on budget monitoring for this financial year and the Q3 revenue forecast. Carys, please.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon. I'm, as the Leader said, I'm Carys Lord, and I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. So the report you have in front of you this afternoon outlines the revenue budget position for the period the 1st of April to the 31st of December 2021. So for the first 3 quarters of this year. The overall projected position at the end of December is a net underspend of £2.5 million, and you'll see the breakdown of that within the report. In summary, there is a net underspend of £2 million on directorates, of 7.4 million on council-wide budgets, and this has been offset by a net appropriation to an earmarked reserve of 7 million. The projected underspend on the budget at Q3 is masking significant budget pressures in some areas, and they have been previously reported, and they do still continue as at the end of December. Just in summary then, these relate to home to school transport. That budget has been supported this year with a one-off budget pressure of £1.2 million, which was agreed by Council in February 2021. The Q3 projections indicate a further pressure of £755,000. Another area of budget pressure in the current financial year relates to social services and wellbeing. There is an underlying pressure in that budget at Q3, and it's masked by a grant that's been received of £2.9 million from the Social Care Recovery Fund. There are some other underspends in the budget in relation to staffing budgets due to difficulties in recruitment. Homelessness received a significant increase. We've seen a significant increase in the provision of temporary accommodation this year, particularly as a result of the pandemic, and that has been previously reported. Council did agree a budget growth in the current financial year of £2.1 million to enable us to continue to support and focus services on homeless individuals. After the budget was approved, Welsh Government confirmed that the COVID Hardship Fund was to be extended into the current financial year, and that included ongoing support for temporary accommodation. However, it has been confirmed that the Hardship Fund will not be in place beyond the end of this financial year, and the budget growth that we've seen in this particular area is likely to see an increased demand going into the new financial year. And the final pressure that I just wanted to draw your attention to is in relation to waste. It was noted back in 2021 that there was a marked increase in the level of waste that the council was being asked to deal with, primarily due to lockdowns and more residents working from home. This pressure has continued into the current financial year, and support was received in the first half of the year from the Hardship Fund, albeit this has now been decreasing as the year has gone by. And again, as the Hardship Fund is not going to be available in the new financial year, this is an underlying cost pressure that we take forward into 2022-23. So as I said, we have, as a consequence of the projected one-off underspend this year, we have been able to create an earmarked reserve to be used to help to support the capital programme and investment in our communities at this unprecedented time. If I could, I'd just like to outline what, the position that COVID-19 has had in relation to the accounts. It's obviously continued to have an impact both on our level of spend and on lost income. And we've been able to continue to claim this from the Hardship Fund in the current financial year. So with regards to expenditure, it is outlined in the report that as at the end of November, we had claimed £9.3 million from the Hardship Fund in relation to expenditure. There is some money on hold in relation to that, predominantly in relation to free school meals, but we are expecting to receive that money before the end of the year. Of that total claim, only £11,000 has been disallowed, and that was expenditure mainly in relation to ongoing home to work arrangements and reimbursement of costs for some temporary outdoor structures built by schools. Welsh Government agreed that these costs were as a result of COVID, but also felt that they would have long-term benefits for the authority, and therefore they've agreed a contribution of only 50% to those costs. In relation to income, we've submitted a loss of income for the first 6 months of this financial year of 1.1 million, and we have received 100% of that. Now, the largest claim relates to 628,000 as a contribution to the council's ledger provider. So the details of these claims are shown for you in tables 2 and 3 within the report. We continue to monitor progress against agreed budget reductions, and these are detailed also for you in the report in section 4.2, and work continues to be done by services to meet these targets. There's a detail in the report of each of these figures, and you can see that in section 4.3, which details the position for every service. Just very briefly then, I'd also draw your attention to the fact that the report does not really reflect the potential impact on the reduction on council tax income at this time. However, we are aware that residents are feeling the financial impact as a result of COVID. We are putting measures in place to support people who are having difficulty in paying their council tax. But we do envisage that our council tax collection rate is likely to be a bit lower this year than maybe it has been in previous years. And we obviously continue to monitor that, as indeed does Welsh Government. So we're also supporting people, as I've said, through the council tax reduction scheme. And this, again, is being monitored by ourselves and by Welsh Government as we go forward. Last year, Welsh Government did provide additional support to local authorities who'd seen an increased demand in this particular area. So, Leader, just to sum up, Cabinet is recommended this afternoon to note the projected revenue position for 21-22 and to recommend that Council approves some environments outlined in the report with regards to money being transferred from the centre out to services. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Carys. Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I think it's welcome, Carys, to the first Cabinet meeting. Is that,
Thank you.
is that right? So it gets a bit rough from here on in, Carys. So yes, today's report is obviously good news. You know, it shows that the authority has a healthy underspend, but for all the reasons that's been explained by Carys, no. If it wasn't for the hardship fund from Welsh Government, then it would be a completely different picture. And we're well aware that the hardship fund is about to come to an end at the end of March this year. So I'm happy to move the report and thank our officers in particular for the efficient way that they've drawn down from that fund with very little rebuttal from Welsh Government. So it shows the professionalism and the due diligence that they put into those claims. So happy to move the report.
Thank you for moving the recommendations, Deputy Leader, and I'd certainly echo those thanks to officers. The large majority of those claims have been successfully made, and it has made a significant difference to the outturners, as colleagues can see. And of course, that hardship fund will not be there next year. Councillor Baldwin, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Carys, Leader, I'm happy to second the proposals within this report. But Carys, I'm wondering if you could answer me a question on, you've mentioned COVID has been an impact on the underspend that we have recorded. I'm just wondering if you're able to detail if there are any other impacts that are causing that underspend in relation to these reports, to the underspends that are listed within this report, whether that be through supply chains or anything, please.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Carys, please.
We are experiencing problems, as you've mentioned, Councillor Baldwin, in relation to supply chains, and that's obviously not unique to Bridgend Council, but everybody is experiencing that. And I guess which also impacts on the capital budget is we are experiencing contractors just not being able to take on additional work, which means that we're not able to progress things as much as maybe we would have liked to have done. We are seeing increased expenditure also because costs are going up as a result of some of these issues, and they are starting to reflect through now into both our revenue and into our capital budgets. So obviously we will need to keep a close eye on these now as we move through to the end of this financial year.
And sorry, Leader and Carys, if I could just have a backup to that question. So where we are seeing inflated and overly inflated costs in the relation to provision of goods and services to us as a local authority, are we then in instances choosing not to issue that work because of inappropriate use of council funds, or whether it would just not be best use of public money to pay double in relation to the provision of some services?
We have to look at that on an individual basis for each item or scheme that it is that we're procuring. Certainly, if costs are coming in considerably more than we'd originally budgeted for, obviously we will review what it is that we are requesting to see whether or not we can review that downwards in some way. We will also have discussions with suppliers with regarding their costs, but if for some schemes that we're moving forward and some areas of expenditure, it's not possible for us not to move forward because they are essential for some of our services to continue. But I think my answer to you, Councillor Baldwin, is we'll look at each one on an individual basis and on individual merits.
Thank you, Carys. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. I think that's a very good point, and a very good example of that, Carys, would be our learner travel budget and the pressures on home to school transport, where we have re-tendered some of the provision, and the prices have been much higher than they were, but we do not have a choice about whether we whether or not we provide those services. We have to. We have a statutory duty to provide home to school transport, and therefore we've had to accept the higher costs that we have seen in the marketplace. But no doubt there are other examples where we are able to consider that. But with most of our services, they are statutory services, and we have to deliver those services. I just wanted to confirm, for you to confirm, Carys, that obviously we've seen this report, but so have all members of the authority, and there's also the route through the overview and scrutiny process and the corporate performance assessment that the budgets for different services are considered as part of that, and as part of our arrangements around budget monitoring and the revenue position.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
Okay, thank you, Carys. Well, the recommendations have been moved and seconded, that we note the revenue position, projected revenue position, I should say, because of course we have another quarter left, and who knows what will happen in the last quarter, and recommend that Council approve the payments between 100,000 and 500,000 as outlined in paragraph 4.122. Is everyone in agreement with those, please?
Agreed.
Yes, thank you.
Aye.
Agree.
Thank you, colleagues. So we now receive the second report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and this is a report on the medium-term financial strategy 2022 to 2023 to 2025 to 2026. Carys, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to present to Cabinet the draft medium-term financial strategy, as the Leader said, for the period 22-23 up to 25-26. It outlines the spending priorities for the Council and the key budget areas that we are looking at as we move forward. The strategy also includes a financial forecast for that period and a more detailed proposed draft revenue budget for the coming financial year 22-23. I would just draw, as that report does, and we've just mentioned, just draw members' attention really to the issues to do with the pandemic and COVID and the ongoing impact that is going to have on our budgets as we go forward. So as the previous agenda outlined for you, there are budget pressures within the current within this year's budget, some of which are going to carry forward into next year. We have had additional resources from Welsh Government to help us meet those costs and to meet the loss of income, which has resulted from the pandemic. And just to reiterate, really, that the hardship fund will come to an end at the end of March 22. That has been confirmed in details from Welsh Government, and the Council is going to have to account for that in the long-term financial planning for the Council. So in section 4 of the report, the current financial situation is outlined together with those ongoing pressures that we are required to meet in the coming years, and we just outlined those in the previous report. In summary, the section details that the planned net budget for the Council is £319.5 million. And that this is funded via a number of different streams, that being the revenue support grant from Welsh Government, our share of the NNDR pool from Welsh Government, and then the balance is made up of grants, fees and charges, and obviously the council tax. The Council has continued to support education and early intervention services, social services and wellbeing services to ensure that we prioritise the vulnerable in our society. And what the MTFS does is to reiterate that going forward, in that we will look at as many ways as we can to maximise the use of the resources that we've got and to be able to continue to protect these services. So it is detailed in the report that the Council will seek to raise additional income, however, where it can. However, very cognizant that there will be limited opportunities to do so, given the immense challenges that COVID-19 has brought to the population. We also continue to seek alternative ways of delivering services, if that can ensure greater sustainability and efficiency. There are efficiency savings required, but after decades of substantial budget savings, the opportunities for large-scale reductions of this sort are very difficult to achieve, but they do remain an important component of the MTFS. And for the coming years, savings include reviewing and rationalising council supplies and services budgets. We'll continue to review all of the property portfolios and the building assets that we have to either generate future income or to rationalise our use of such properties. And also we will continue to review the level of services that we provide and prioritise those services that are deemed most important in terms of meeting the Council's agreed objectives. So section 4 of the report of the MTFS does give details on particular issues for each service in the Council. And I'll just summarise those because I appreciate it is a lengthy report. In relation to education, the Council is proposing to spend 131 million on services delivered by Education and Family Support Directorate. And in addition, there's capital funding available to support, build and refurbish our schools as part of the Band B programme under the 21st Century Modernisation Programme. It is proposed that schools are not asked to find what was originally suggested as a 1% annual efficiency target identified in previous versions of the MTFS. If I might, Leader, I'd just point out that it's been pointed out that there is an error in the narrative concerning education services. The MTFS is subject to review. This is not the final iteration of the document, and therefore this will be amended when the final version comes back to Cabinet on the 22nd of February. In relation to social care and wellbeing, again, the Council is proposing to spend 78 million on social care and wellbeing services in the coming year. The Council strategy is to transform how we work with people, and the service has been introducing new ways of working which just make the service sustainable in the longer term. And the budget saving proposals for 22-23 build on the implementation plans that are already underway. In relation to public realm services, the Council is proposing to spend around 22 million on these services in the coming year. And an ongoing challenge for this service remains how you continue to meet public expectations for the highly visible and tangible services within the overall Council budget. So the report also outlines what the Council will do going forward to support the local economy, the work done by regulatory and corporate services, together with other Council-wide services. So if I may, I'd just like to outline the financial context going forward. Due to the late announcement of the comprehensive spending review, the provisional local government settlement was not received until the 21st of December 2021. And the draft settlement set out revenue and general capital spending plans for 22-23, and they also included planned allocations for 23-24 and 24-25. The headline figure for the revenue budget for 22-23 was an overall increase of 9.4% across Wales. And for Bridgend, the increase was a 9.2% increase in our funding from Welsh Government. I have to stress that within this settlement figure, the Council is required to meet the cost of teachers' pay deal, to match some funding for 21-22 and for the 22-23 teachers' pay deal. We're also required to meet the increased national insurance contributions, and we're also required to meet the additional cost of introducing the real living wage for care workers, and the details of this are still to be received. At the time of the draft settlement, we were given information on specific grants available, but most of these are currently available on an all Wales level and not yet at an individual authority level, and we will receive these now in the coming few weeks. And it's important to note, and I'm sorry this is repeating what was said at the last agenda item, that there is no hardship grant for the coming financial year. Therefore, any ongoing costs in relation to the pandemic, we would be expected to meet within our own existing budgets as we go forward. So what you have in front of you is the draft MTFS for the period up to 25-26. And it's been based on the latest information that is available from Welsh Government. It also does some financial modelling with regards to what the scenarios will look like as we move forward over that period. So the draft revenue budget for the coming financial year, as detailed in this report, assumes no increase in council tax for the coming financial year. This is due to there being a better than anticipated provisional settlement, and also in response to some of the issues that were raised through the budget consultation, which was considered by Cabinet last month. Going forward, the scale of the financial challenge remains considerable. So an assumed annual increase in council tax has been included in the following financial years. It has to be said these are just estimates, and those figures will be reviewed as the MTFS is developed over the coming year and as more information is made available to us with regard to funding levels, together with pressures on our budget as we move through next year. So at paragraph 4.11.4, the potential net budget reduction requirement for the coming years is summarised. and based on the data available, the savings total over the period of the MTFS stand at 21 million. And these pressures in the budget are related to demographic changes, inflationary pressures, new regulatory and legislative requirements, increases in fees and charges, and also increases in staffing costs, in particular in relation to the national insurance contributions and the national living wage. To date, some budget deficiencies have been identified and are reported in the MTFS, but these will be challenging to meet. And as I've said above, we will continue to review these during the lifetime of the medium-term financial strategy. So the draft revenue budget for 22-23 is shown in table 6 of the Cabinet report. And in drafting this, I just draw your attention to some of the following. Cost pressures have been identified and are proposed to be costed of 11.86 million, and these are detailed in Appendix A of the report. Some of the most significant pressures going forward for next year include implementation of the Additional Learning Needs Educational Tribunal Act, costs of home to school transport, which I've said is already a pressure that we're seeing in this year's revenue budget, increased pressures on adult social care, increased costs in the supported living service, and an impact of the increase of the real living wage in the social care sector. As well as budget pressures, the report does outline for you proposed budget reductions next year of 631,000, and these are identified in detailed for you in Appendix B. Should be noticed it has been possible to reduce some of the savings originally anticipated for the coming financial year as a result of the draft settlement, which I've outlined above. There's also some details on the Council's earmarked reserves shown at table 8 in the report, and members will be aware that we do keep these under regular review, and the position will be updated in the final MTF's report, which will be considered by Council at the end of February. The MTFS does also refer to capital spend, and capital monies were granted to us by Welsh Government as part of our draft settlement. And the latest capital programme is actually to be considered tomorrow by Council, and any further changes will be included in the final version of the MTFS, again, which will go to Council for approval in February. So that was what I wanted to say, really, Leader, other than to say that it's recommended that Cabinet submits for consultation with overview and scrutiny committees this draft budget and the development of the MTFS for the period to 25-26 as set out in report, prior to final versions coming back to Cabinet and Council in February.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Carys. And I know it's never easy to develop a medium-term financial strategy, but particularly not your first one for a local authority, and it's your first strategy for Bridgend. And I know that you worked closely with your predecessor in the development of this medium-term financial strategy, and we benefited from that transitional arrangement when you were both for a short period working together on it, and thanks to your team as well for their work. And I wanted to start by adding that obviously I'm predisposed to the proposals in the medium-term financial strategy, because of course this strategy has been developed by Cabinet together with the Corporate Management Board, and that is the process that has always been in place in terms of the preparation of budgets for this authority, and no doubt it will be the process in the future. That said, of course, the strategy has now been published, and the recommendation is that it is submitted to the overview and scrutiny process. And of course, as we have done every year, we'll want to, I'll want to, and all Cabinet members will want to listen to the views of all members on the proposals. Certainly a key principle for us, and I believe a key principle for all members when setting the medium-term financial strategy. It's a message we've heard repeatedly from members from across the political spectrum, is that we keep to a minimum and avoid, if at all possible, proposals to cut frontline services, particularly essential and important frontline services, and also a principle that we keep any council tax increase to an absolute minimum, and of course, if we can afford it, we avoid any increase in the council tax. And I have to say that I am very pleased that we have had a record increase in revenue support grant from the Welsh Government. That has made a big difference to the budget this year. It was not an increase that any of us anticipated and predicted back in the summer. No authority in Wales predicted that, but it has enabled us, I think, to consider today a medium-term financial strategy that members, I hope, can support I will now bring the deputy leader in, but before I do that, I just wanted to check with you, Carys, that there aren't any other last minute changes that have to be made to the medium-term financial strategy. Sometimes we find, don't we, that there are some tweaks that need to be made because of some changes by Welsh Government, for example, to the final settlement or the announcement of new grants, for example, during this period.
If you'd like me to just come back in then, Leader, with regards to this, as you said, it is a draft MTFS. It is subject to change, and those changes may be for a number of reasons. Comments that were received now between now and when we actually finalise it towards the end of September. Not September, February, sorry. And also, as you said, we are currently working on the draft settlement, and we won't have the final settlement again until later. However, Welsh Government have assured us that any changes should be minimal at this stage, because they appreciate we all have to work towards setting our budgets now by the 11th of March. And because the draft settlement was announced so late, they have been able to incorporate many of their assumptions into there. So there shouldn't be many changes to the final settlement, but it always is a possibility. So yes, there may be changes, and I did mention there is one reference in there in relation to education, which has been brought to our attention, which we will change now ahead of the February, and any items that come out through the scrutiny committees, which are meeting over the next week now, will also be fed into that final process.
Okay, thank you for that, Carys, and that's useful to know, and it is very helpful that Welsh Government have taken that position in terms of the final settlement. I'll now bring the deputy leader in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, before I respond, may I make it absolutely clear that while I am predisposed, my mind is open. The report before us is still in draft, and I'm open to consider all representations. Today is just another step towards the 23rd of February meeting of Council. The MTFS, or the Mid-Term Financial Strategy, is a bit like a wheel, without beginning or end. The starting point, if you need one, would have been the 24th of February 21, last year, the moment after we approved the council budget. And then that was updated on the 14th of September this year, where we published the Cabinet our latest assumptions. And these assumptions are continually updated, and the level of council tax is always the final piece of the equation to produce a balanced budget. It's our statutory obligation to produce a balanced budget. And as assumptions become known, like the Welsh Government settlement announcement, then the strategy can be updated. We have recommendations from the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel, and they are considered. We have the results from the public budget consultation. They are fed into the process. And we also have representations from elected members. These are all considered and feed into the mid-term financial strategy process. It's a process that's ongoing right up until the moment prior to all elected members will be invited to cast a vote on the 23rd of February. So my mind is completely open. All I wanted to say in relation to this report is a big thank you to everyone who's contributed so far. That is to the finance team and to the Welsh Local Government Association, Welsh Government ministers and officers. I don't want to underestimate the effort that's gone into making the case for local government. and when we heard the settlement, that was very welcome news. Budget proposals before us are balanced and I believe represents a responsible use of public finance. I move the recommendation and I eagerly await further representations and comments between now and the 23rd of February. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Just looking to see one of the colleagues want to come in. Perhaps I'll bring Councillor Smith in first, please. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Leader. And I would like to say that, of course, I'm predisposed towards welcoming these recommendations. Not predetermined, my mind is open to any new evidence. But after 9 years as a councillor, 6 or 7 years as a cabinet member, it is refreshing for once not to be harassed by imposed ideological austerity, and able to look at some new spending plans and able to hopefully freeze the council tax. And I'd like to thank colleagues for collectively being willing to support the proposal to increase spending in schools. On the basis of the evidence, I'm very happy to second the recommendations.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Smith. And it is of note, isn't it, that there are a number of proposals in the budget pressures table that I'm sure will be welcomed by all members around supporting children with additional learning needs. So, in particular, the proposal for a Welsh medium moderate learning difficulties learning resource centre at secondary level and a new learning resource centre. Also the additional funding for additional places for education other than at school, because no doubt we've all seen the rise in casework and the rise in need and demand for education, for support for children with additional educational needs. I'll bring Councillor Baldwin in next, please. Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Leader. And not to elongate this meeting longer than it needs to be, I'll mirror the comments in relation to predisposition and predetermination, but I also want to welcome the projects that have been identified in Table 9 of the report and encourage, it looks encouraging in relation to tackling empty properties, which continues to be a blight on our society, and I welcome any action against those. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin. And then Councillor Gebbie, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. As I'm sure all my colleagues are aware, I am predisposed to fighting for good settlements for local government and welcome not only the proposals in relation to social services. It's vitally important that we assist our residents currently as much as we can with their finances. The cost of living has exponentially increased, and it looks highly likely that we're going to be paying 50% more in our fuel costs alone. So when I consider the cabinet reports that I've already agreed and sent out, which we've had no concerns raised with, I think it's really important that we agree these proposals, because it does give the real living wage to all our social care workers. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gebbie. And then finally, Councillor Patel, please.
Thanks, Leader. And actually, I would like to thank you for all your hard work you've done in lobbying for additional resources and additional funding for local government. You know, like Councillor Smith said, we've had cut after cut after cut for the last 9 years, and I know that you've always tried to champion local government when you meet with ministers, and I personally don't think central taxation is distributed fairly. So I just wanted to thank you for that, actually, and I know that you've spent a long time and lots of hours making the case. So yeah, thanks, and I'm sure I speak for all colleagues in this meeting. I did have a question on the best case, worst case scenarios. So in previous reports, we've always seen the worst case as way worse than that, and the best case is probably what the worst case looks like in this report. So just wanted to ask Carys why those figures have changed so much, and yeah, that's basically it. Like, why is the worst case become a lot better than in previous reports? Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patel. And before I invite Carys to respond to that point, I'd like to take all the credit, or even some of the credit, for our best ever settlement and the biggest increase we've ever had from Welsh Government. But I can't. It's been all 22 local authorities that have been making the case to Welsh Government, and of course it's been the decision of the First Minister and his Cabinet to support local services, to support schools and social services through this revenue support grant, and we are very, very grateful to Welsh Government for that. I'll now ask Carys to respond to Councillor Patel's point around the forecast in terms of the revenue support grant, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I mean, just very briefly, we are required to look forward, obviously, in our financial planning so that we can work with services, etc., to make sure that whatever is planned is actually financially achievable in the coming years. So that's why we look forward over that time period within the MTFS. When we pull the data together, it's always based on the information that's available to us at the time, together with any predictions or other soft information that we may have. In past years, I suppose some of the worst case scenario planning has been based on a number of years of austerity and a number of years of significant reduction in expenditure within local government. And that's what's predicated what's been our worst and best scenarios, really. The one thing we've had in this draft settlement that we haven't had for a number of years now is some indicative figures going forward of what the settlement for local government may look like. So whereas we have a detailed allocation for Bridgend for the coming year, what we have at an all Wales level is some predictions with regards to the settlement for the following 2 years, but it's not broken down into local authority, it's just an overall prediction. And that is indicating some growth in the settlement as we go forward over the following 2 years, which has meant that some of our worst case scenario planning isn't possibly as severe as you may have seen in the past. I suppose the only thing I would say on that is that they are showing some growth as we move forward on the settlement, but bear in mind that that will have to meet additional pressures, service pressures that we've already outlined within this report and in the previous report. They will have to meet things like inflation and any new legislative or more service requirements placed on us. But they are an indication of growth in the settlement, and therefore we have been able to reflect that in some of our forward planning in possibly a more positive way than we have done in the past.
Thank you, Carys. That's really helpful.
It is very helpful, isn't it, Councillor Patel? And thank you for that explanation, Carys. It is helpful to have those forecasted increases, but as you said, as you've explained very well, the circumstances have changed, and they've changed quite significantly, haven't they? since the last set of forecasts, and no one anticipated the level of increase that we we have had this year. So this time last year, we were predicting a need to increase the council tax because, like every local authority in Wales and probably Welsh Government ministers, we were expecting a much smaller increase in the revenue support grant. But whilst it is better to have some forecast than no forecast at all, those forecasts do need to be treated with caution, don't they? For the reasons that we've just discussed. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I didn't have this supplementary question until just after Carys started speaking, but it's in relation to the variances between each local authority that we could see. And I was just wondering whether Carys is able to give me some sort of answer about the difference we've had between the top allocation and the bottom allocation in this year's, because obviously if we've had indicative all Wales settlements for next year, that could make our picture look completely different, but then we could end up with the bottom level allocation as opposed to the top level. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to issue any sort of information to people living within our communities around and raise aspirations around what we may be able to do, and then pull back on that at last minute when we see the overall allocation, which could mean that people are going to be worse off having thought that they would be better off. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. And Carys, that was the point I was going to make when I was speaking earlier, actually, but it occurred to me, and then I went on a mini ramble. But I think that variance within the settlement is, as Councillor Baldwin explained, crucial, isn't it? Because it can be 1, 2, 3 percentage points, and that can make all the difference to the medium-term financial strategy. And that's a second very important reason why the forecasting is extremely difficult. So even if the overall percentage is correct, and I don't think we've got that forecast right yet, but who has, because it's very difficult in these current circumstances to make accurate forecasts. But even if that were correct, then there is always change within the revenue support grant between different local authorities, and you never know whether Bridgend is in the middle, towards the top, or towards the bottom. And there has always been, certainly since I've been a cabinet member, a significant differential between the highest increase and the lowest increase, or in some circumstances no increase at all, and the highest increase. Over to you, though, please, Carys.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, that's a very interesting question and an important one as well, actually. The average increase across Wales was 9.4% for the coming financial year, but the spread of that was 8.4% was the lowest increase and 11.2% was the highest increase. So Bridgend was just below the Welsh average, as in fact were a number of other authorities on that 9.2% increase. I think it's important to say that where authorities lie within that differential changes year on year as well. There are so many factors that impact on the final settlement that come through, and many of them are changed on an annual basis. Yeah. So population changes, for instance, are quite a big driver within the way in which this money is allocated. So whereas we were quite close to the average in the current financial year, you can't apply that assumption as we move forward, because we can move up and down that spectrum, really. So, I mean, that's a very important question. And as the leader says, that's another reason why it's very difficult to forecast these things going forward, because there will be change as well in the way in which the RSG is allocated on an annual basis.
Just to build on that point, because it is a very, very important point, even if we know, for example, have a very good idea of how our population is rising, the number of children eligible for free school meal, and other important variables that influence the funding formula, we won't know about other local authorities. So we could think that, well, our population's increased, we will go up the league table, or the number of children eligible for free school meal has increased, we will go up the league table, but we have no way of knowing what's happening to other authorities in real time, because this is an annual process. So that is another very important variable in the forecasting that is that we try to do every year, and that is a requirement, isn't it, of us to try and develop a medium-term financial strategy. But what we do have, though, is certainty about this year's settlement from Welsh Government, and that's a sound basis on which we can make decisions about this year's council tax and this year's spending. Can you just remind colleagues, Carys, about the next steps? Obviously, there will be engagement now with members. I know there's been engagement already with the Budget Research and Evaluation Panel, very close and effective engagement, and I'm sure you can confirm that we have worked very hard to reflect the views, of course, of that panel, that cross-party panel in this strategy.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So the next steps are, as you said, the BREP process has been ongoing for a number of months and has come up with a lot of questions and suggestions going forward, which now will feed into the process. Also, this report now goes through to all of the scrutiny committees starting tomorrow. And the scrutiny committees are now meeting for 3 mornings this week, and again, and the third one is meeting at the beginning of next week. Again, the purpose of those is to share this report with the members of the scrutiny committees, and really to ask for questions, queries, to tease out any issues that people may still have with regards to these proposals. And then ultimately that will all be pulled together, and the final MTFS estimates will come through into Cabinet on the 22nd of February and then forward into Council on the 23rd of February.
Okay, thank you for that, Carys. Well, Deputy Leader has moved the recommendation. So have a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Gebbie. Is everyone in agreement with the recommendation, please?
Aye.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Carys, and obviously look forward to the next steps in the strategy. The next report is another report from the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and it is an update on our capital programme for 2021 to 2022, Q3. Carys, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So as you said, this is the monitoring report for the first 3 months of this financial year in relation to our capital programme. So what it seeks to do is to update you in relation to the programme as at the end of December. It's also seeking approval for the revised capital programme, because things have changed within the programme, and also it does include a report on our performance against our prudential and other indicators for the year. So just on the capital programme itself, it was approved. It was last approved by Council back in October last year, and at that time the total forecast spend for the year was 76.6 million. The revised capital programme, which is in front of you this afternoon, is reporting a revised expenditure of 49.6 million in the current financial year. and the report does detail slippage of 30 million moving from this year into future years. When we talk about slippage, what we mean is that some schemes are now not expected to spend in full during the current financial year. And therefore some of that spend will move into future financial years. The scheme, however, does remain in the capital programme, and the commitment to spend on those schemes are still there. What slippage is really doing is reflecting that the funding of it will move between financial years. So there are some key schemes that are being slipped at this stage, and they're outlined for you in the report at paragraph 4.4, and they include some work on highways work in relation to Band B schools, some issues around schools capital maintenance, mainly because we've had grant received from Welsh Government, so we can defer some of this spend into next year. There's also some slippage in relation to vehicles, some of the regeneration schemes and some of the coastal risk management programme. And so those are detailed for you. I think just to outline so that you're reassured why schemes have slipped, and there's always a number of reasons as to why that might be the case. One I've just mentioned is in relation to schools capital maintenance, for instance, where we've had money awarded to us from Welsh Government, and it's displacing the money in the current financial year, and therefore it's moving forward into the following financial year. We have delays in timelines for some of our agreed schemes, and these are for factors really which are outside of the control of the council. But that would include issues such as supply chains, where we are having difficulty in getting the supplies that we need in order to complete schemes. And also we are having experiences of a shortage of contractors undertaking some of the required works, which is delaying start dates for schemes. We're also looking at further designing some of the works on some of the schemes before they're let. We have delays in funding awards, so there is a mention in the report that we are expecting more money in this year, but we haven't had that confirmed, which is does likely mean those schemes will slip. And then finally, that the pandemic is impacting as well on the programme, and therefore we've had to reprogram some of the works. So as I've said, we are anticipating further slippage in the forthcoming quarter, although at this stage we can't accurately forecast what that will be, but any further slippage will be reported early in the new financial year. As well as some things slipping though, there are some new schemes being added to the capital programme which total just over 3 million. And they're in relation to ultra low emissions vehicles, where we've had money funded by Welsh Government to support us in that. We've also had money from Welsh Government in relation to the Metro Plus Local Transport Fund. We've had a Salex loan in relation to the Princethin depot facilities. So even this late in the financial year, if you like, we're still having new programmes approved into the capital programme. So, and just very briefly at the end of that report, we talk about the prudential indicators which are there to ensure that capital expenditure and our investment and borrowing decisions are prudent and they are sustainable. So this looks at our borrowing requirements and whether or not we will need to borrow. As we are slipping money from this year into next, we are likely to have to borrow less money this year than we'd originally anticipated. However, due to the short-term balance of reserves that the council has, we're not currently predicting we'll require any new borrowing in the current financial year. And the positive around that is that obviously we don't incur any loan debt, so that we support our revenue budget as we're going forward. So the recommendations for this particular report, Leader, are that we're asking you to note the capital programme Q3 update at the from April to December. We're asking you to agree that revised capital programme be submitted to council for approval, and that you note the project, the prudential and other indicators as reported for 21-22.
Thank you for that, Carys. Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, clearly the pandemic has had an impact on our capital programme. It has caused major disruption, but just want to give assurances, I suppose, that these projects are still a priority for us. They're still good projects, and we have every intention of continuing them and delivering them for the benefit of the county borough. I also welcome the extra grant funding from Welsh Government towards our commitment to improve or expand our fleet of ultra low emission vehicles, and obviously the project to have photovoltaics on the roof of the Bryncestyn depot, and be very interesting to see how the battery storage system works there, because that is quite a new and innovative kind of scheme, and I'm sure we can learn some lessons from that that we'll be able to share with others. So all in all, it's a good report. I'm happy to move it.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations, please? Councillor Baldwin, please, and then Councillor.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm happy to second the proposals within that report, and thank you again, Carys, for highlighting so often it is easy to blame the pandemic as an issue for it, but thank you for highlighting that we have issues in relation to the contractors and the availability of workforce to deliver the important priorities and projects that we have, so they don't become less of a priority for us as councillors. Unfortunately, it's the ability to be able to deliver them within the timelines and timescales that we've got, and I'm glad to see as well with some of the issues through the work of our employability team, where we as a local authority are reacting to try and meet the gaps that are within the issues like bus drivers and HGV drivers. So thank you, Carys.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin, and then Councillor Patel, please.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Carys. I just had a question on the slippage, really. Obviously, lots of these schemes have been, well, a lot of the funding has slipped into the next financial year. I just wanted reassurance, I guess, that these projects will still be going ahead, and if you've got any indication as to well, I guess there's so many projects, we'll be here all day if we went through every single one. So for me, I just noticed that the Maesteg Town Hall in particular is something of interest to me, and I can see that money has been slipped into 22-23. I don't know if you know any details about what impact that would have on the completion date. See, Janine's come on.
Councillor Patel.
I was saying, I'm glad Janine appeared on the scene then, because she can certainly do the Maesteg Town Hall. All I was going to say in relation to the slippage is that all of those schemes that are slipping, we are able to slip them into next year. We are able to take that funding with us, and that they will all still be delivered. Just the timelines have moved slightly, and Janine will know a lot more about the Maesteg Town Hall scheme.
Okay, thank you for that, Carys. Janine, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. Yes, the Maesteg Town Hall is one of our key regeneration projects. It hasn't been the easiest of projects to deliver, Leader, because we're trying to deliver right in the middle of a pandemic. And also, first of all, we had some issues. We had to limit the number of staff that were on site because of the pandemic rules. That was the first issue we dealt with. The second was we have had issues procuring the steels because there's been a shortage in the supply chain to build the extension at the front of the property. And the third issue we've had recently is when we removed the front steps out from the property, we had some issue with some damp there. I mean, the property is so old, Leader, we've had issues throughout the whole project. But what I want to say is, yes, there has been a little bit of extension in time. We think we'll be now completing that in the summer as opposed to in the spring. But what I will say is the building is looking absolutely fantastic. It is a real treat to go in there, and as somebody who grew up in Maesteg, to go in and actually see the restoration of that building, I'm sure everybody in Maesteg estate will be thrilled to see it when it's finished. Some of the efforts to conserve and to reveal some parts of the building people have never ever seen. Some of the beautiful steel columns, ornate, that were covered in the market hall. We've uncovered the real stage, where the stage was to begin with before it was covered over. We've restored paintings, the beautiful clock tower. You know, there's been some fantastic restoration work gone on. So admittedly, it's taken longer than we wanted to. But the one thing I will say, when it comes down to restoration projects, the quality is in the finish now. What we don't want to do is rush this back end of the project, because that's where we will really get the building looking as it should. So there has been a little bit of slippage from some issues with supply chain, but we're hoping to open up that building in the summer of this year.
Thank you for that, Janine, and as well as all the reasons that have been outlined for some of the projects taking longer, and those are factors that every organisation across the UK that commissions this type of work is currently experiencing, as well as those difficulties. We've also, as well, haven't we, Caris, once again this year, more perhaps this year than any year, received finance from Welsh Government very late in the financial year, and of course that's very much welcomed by this authority and every authority, but it is sometimes very difficult to spend all of that money straight away when it's for capital, but obviously there is a way and there are ways that we use to make sure that that funding is secured and the work is carried out. Okay, well, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll now receive the final report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and that is on our public space protection orders. Caris, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So this report seeks Cabinet approval to consult with the Police and Crime Commissioner and other relevant bodies in relation to a number of public space public protection orders. Just by way of background, antisocial behaviour is a broad term to describe the day-to-day incidents of crime, nuisance and disorder that make many people's lives a misery. And responsibility for dealing with such a range of behaviours is shared between a number of agencies, particularly the police, the local authorities and social landlords. And the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014 does set out 6 tools for responsible bodies and responsible authorities to manage this behaviour, and one of these is the use of public space protection orders. So there's an existing PSPO in Bridgend County Borough, which was enacted in June 2019 and will expire in June this year. And they relate to the control of alcohol, restriction of access to public space and also dog controls. So the details of the current PSPO are control of alcohol in public spaces, which has enabled the police to remove alcohol from those that are engaging or are likely to engage in antisocial behaviour. The restriction of public access to the area between Talbot Street and Plasnewith Street. And in relation to dog control, the PSPO enables officers to give direction with regards to dogs off lead, dogs causing a nuisance in a public place, which would also include dog fouling. So before the council can either make, extend or vary a PSPO, there's a procedure that must be followed. And in particular, the local authority must carry out consultation with the Chief Officer of the Police in the area and the Police and Crime Commissioner. Must consult with any community representatives that the local authority think it's appropriate to consult with, and also the owner or occupier of any land with any instructed restricted area. So what we're asking Cabinet to consider today is to give approval for public consultation to propose the extension of the current public space protection order as outlined in paragraph 4.3 of the report that's before you this afternoon, particularly in relation to the extension of the current PSPO relating to alcohol control in Caira, Pencoed, Porthcawl, Maesteg and Bridgend on identical terms as the current one, but also to extend the area covered by the current PSPO relating to alcohol to include the play area in Wild Mill in Bridgend, to extend the current PSPO that restricts access between Talbot Street and Plasnewydd on the identical terms as there currently is in place, and also extension of the current PSPO regarding dog control in the county area, again on the identical terms as the current PSPO. So the details of the areas for consultation are included in section 4 of the report, and if approved this afternoon, the statutory consultation period would commence on the 7th of February 2022 and would continue for 12 weeks. So Cabinet is also asked to note that following that consultation, a further report will be made to Cabinet for decision on extending and varying the PSPOs depending on what comes out of that consultation. Happy to take any questions, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Carys. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Carys, again for this report. I think the residents of my ward would be particularly interested in the formal consultation aspect following a summer of lockdown that has encouraged camping within the adventure play area in Wild Mill that resulted in the family staying there for over a week and barbecuing in a shopping trolley and drinking various amounts of alcohol. So the residents of the street adjacent to that will have great interest in this consultation, and I think for them the 12-week consultation will not close quick enough. But I want to thank the team, including Judith, for the work that's been done in preparing this report, and I'm happy to move the recommendations, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. And we know that public space protection orders have been an important tool in the past in reducing antisocial behaviour and criminal activity across the county borough in the places where the PSPOs have been introduced. And so it's important that we are able to renew these orders, and in some cases, as in Bridgend, we're able to extend it in response to the local need that's been identified. And I think we're all looking forward to the result of the consultation, the public consultation that will take place. So thank you very much, Carys. That's your last report today, so you can take a well-deserved sip of water, I think, or something else if you want. But definitely need a break, and we'll move on now to the first report today from the Corporate Director for Communities on the Connect, Engage, Listen and Transform regional project. Janine, please.
Oh, thank you, Leader. With me 1 minute. Right, got it. Okay, so the first report that we've got for you this afternoon is about the Celt Regional Project. Now, the purpose of the report is to seek permission for BCBC to enter into a regional agreement for funding and for the delivery of the Connect, Engage, Listen, Transform CELT project, which essentially, Leader, is an employability project to encourage people back into the workforce. Now, this has been funded via the UK Government's Community Renewal Fund, and we've been working with 9 other of the local authorities that make up the Cardiff Capital City Deal region on this bid. So we are working together for a regional approach to be a bit more effective in awarding grants. And I suppose it's timely that we are talking about the benefits of this, Leader, as we talked earlier on in this cabinet with our chief exec about the city deal and the benefits it brings to us by that regional working approach. And this is just one example, really, of that coming into action. So the background of the project is set out in section 3 of the report. I think what's important to note is the end of the European Social Fund is going to happen for the Employability Service this year and through to next year. So it has created a need to replace this funding, particularly with the focus on employability. And we know that the employability programme, particularly in Bridgend, has been enormously successful to date, with hundreds and hundreds of people getting back into work and being trained, placements. And recently, Leader, we had over 50 people get their HGV licences because we know of the shortage of drivers. And again, that was all helped by the employability programme. So it's a very wide and varied programme, and essential we continue it. So we worked with the 10 LAs in a cluster group to look at the funding, and Torfaen submitted the bid to UK government for us, and for 1.9 million. And last June, they put that project in, and our element of that, Leader, was 274,000. That's what Bridgend were bidding for as part of that bid. Now, this was based on working with 140 residents of the borough, and with the target of getting at least 26 of them back into gainful employment. And the project was set to run from July last year right through to March this year. So another thing that's very important to note is that it's anticipated that this Community Renewal Fund of UK Government will act as a pilot to inform the development of the Shared Prosperity Fund. And that's the next set of funding that's come in. Now, the Shared Prosperity Fund is thought to be that the permanent and substantial replacement for European funds in the UK. And certainly it'll be very important for us to gain monies from that fund to continue our employability programme. Now, the important bit about this work that we're doing on this CELT programme is that we're able to adapt the programme for our local needs. So, for instance, in Bridgend, we can look to engage participants that are furthest away from the labour market, those that have been disengaged for a long time, Leader. And also, we want to do some work with GPs and health visitors and health practices to look for referrals to get people back into work. And also, we want to do something which is called the Bridgend Employability Network, where we work with partners, employers and the third sector in a network to look for opportunities for the people that come through our front door. Now, Torfaen received confirmation of funding in November, which was great, so the regional approach worked. But the UK government extended the project by a further 3 months because of the delay in approving the funding. So it will now run from November 21 right through to the end of June this year. So the targets in the bid are set out in paragraph 4.2 of our report in front of you. They reflect the revised timetable. And basically what we're saying is we want to work with about 130 clients and still get as many of them into work as we can, 26 or more. It's ambitious, but we think it's deliverable. So we're currently working on delivering our first milestone for the project, as we should, and it's a meeting of this Bridgend Employability Network. So it's to get all those providers and those businesses, employers together. And also the other thing we're doing is working on the relationship agreement for CELT, which has to be agreed by all of the 10 LAs. And what the relationship agreement will do, it'll set out all the terms and conditions and the funding and what we need to achieve. The other thing we're obliged to do, Leader, as part of this grant is to participate in the operational delivery group, but that will be made up of a representative of each of the 10 LAs, and we will probably have the leader of our employability programme will be nominated. But the great thing about this delivery group is that we'll have the opportunity to oversee the projects, but also share information, share best practice and review progress together. Now, when we come to the financial implications, this scheme, the CELT scheme, is fully funded by UK government. So Torfaen are the lead authority for us. No match funding requirement at all for us, fully funded. However, due to the constraints of the project, we need to start that work now. We need to start working with those people in the community now. Now, all local authorities have got to sign up to that relationship agreement because the funding offer is in that. So what we're going to do, we're going to start ahead of signing that agreement, Leader, because any risk to the project will be underwritten by the Community Directorate. I don't think we should be waiting for all 10 authorities to sign up. The risks are very minimal, though, as Torfaen has already accepted the UK government offer. So let me please take you to the recommendations in section 9 of the report. Note the progress on the CELT project, and particularly how successful working in a regional approach has been in order to attract this funding, and how we've learned lessons and we want to work in this way in the future. Delegate authority to negotiate and enter into the agreement, and also agree nominees for the strategic and operational boards. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Janine, for that report. It's a very important strand of our work, is helping people into work who are not in work currently or in jobs that are not appropriate. And it's important because we've always very successfully secured funding for such initiatives, either from Welsh Government or European funding, and therefore now we'll obviously be looking to the new UK Government fund to continue this work in the future. And before I bring Councillor Baldwin in, I just wanted to check that, and I know you can confirm this, that we have a number of initiatives already, but we have them in one place through the employability programme. So there's no risk of duplication or people falling between any gaps in the programme. So if you could confirm that, excuse me, before I bring Councillor Baldwin in, that would be helpful. Thank you, Janine.
No problem, Leader. Yeah, of course, this programme itself will sit within the employability section. It will be complementary to the work we're already doing. Excellent. And in fact, it might be that this programme is more meaningful and might work better for some of the people that are in other programmes currently. So it will sit with the team. The lady Sue Whittaker, who leads our employability service, will be the representative on the board, having all the learning and lessons. In fact, she was the one who helped negotiate some of this application, Leader. So we're absolutely thrilled with this regional approach, and it is entirely complementary with the existing work.
Thank you for that, Janine. That's reassuring. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. And yes, the European funding position has been very precarious while we're waiting for the Shared Prosperity Fund information to come out. And I suppose one of the advantages of this level of funding that's coming from UK government at the moment, just to answer some of the questions the Leader has raised there, is that in the past there would have been issues around double funding of individuals moving from one European fund to another European fund. But now this is a UK government funded position, and there is no issue with it being with individuals being double funded. I also support the at-risk element at the start of this project because of my previous job as head of enterprise and employment was around working with individuals that were furthest away from the labour market. working with those individuals can take them 6 months to get to the table, never mind to get them into any sort of employment. So we know that we have, and while the labour market has changed significantly because of the impact of the pandemic and people who were in gainful employment no longer being in employment, there are still significant barriers that are required to be overcome by individuals that engage in these, and whether that be a transition from benefits into employment, achieving the sustained employability outcomes of either 13 or 26 weeks, all impact on an individual's and a participant's ability to be able to engage in programs such as this. But again, you know, Sue Whitaker, I'm going to mention her by name. We talk about an employability team, and there are an amount of people that work around Sue Whitaker. But Sue Whitaker is the what we would have called the centre pole of our bonfire when we were younger. She's the one that is there, that is putting all of these programs in place and working and using her skills and her knowledge across all of the South East Wales area to make sure that Bregend plays a very active part in the employability programs that are being delivered. Fully support all of this work. We have seen the difference that that these projects and programs can make to individuals, not just individuals, but to their families' life choices and situations. This can change the aspirations of children and grandchildren within families that give them the inspiration to move on, and maybe in situations where we've seen third generation people out of work, people moving into work. So I'm quite happy to approve the recommendations in this report, Leader. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin. Points very well made. Councillor Smith is next, please.
I'd like to second that we approve the recommendations, and like Stuart, I'd like to pay tribute to the team. I think it's fair to say that in the past, employability services have been rather fragmented. That was nobody's fault. It was due to administrative factors that sourced these services through different funding schemes. I think we've made big progress over the last couple of years into unifying this service. I know young people, in particular young people in my ward, and also young people in my family who have needed that little boost to confidence that they get from a one-to-one interview with one of the team. And even if the team don't specifically find an individual youngster a specific job at any particular time, they do actually help in that process of bringing some structure into young people's lives and getting into the world of work. And once you're in, then at whatever level, in whatever post, experience shows that you can go on from there and progress a career. So I think this is very important work. It's a scandal we've left the European Union, which has been levelling up for the last 40 years, but we can only do the best that we can with the tools that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith, and thank you for seconding the recommendations. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please? Thank you. Colleagues, we'll now receive the second. Thank you, Councillor Patel. We'll now receive the second report of the Corporate Director for Communities, and that is on the Bregend Local Area Action Plan. Janine, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, so the purpose of this report is to present and seek approval for the refreshed Bregend Local Area Energy Plan. Background, Section 3 sets out the background, Leader, and I want to start by saying that BCBC was selected right back in 2014 as one of 3 demonstrator areas in the UK's government for their Smart System and Heat programme. And that was about looking at ways to decarbonise heat way back in 2014. It was approved by the Cabinet, your Cabinet, in 2015. So we're a very early adopter in Bregend of some of this work. I know there's an awful lot of work going on currently, but Bregend was at the forefront of this work nationally. up to 6 or 7 years ago. So one of the tools in this programme, in this Smart Systems and Heat programme, is something called the Local Area Energy Plan. Now, what that is a tool that looks at the characteristics of a particular area. It looks at the building types, the fabric energy efficiency, etc. And using the Energy Path Network tool, it develops a pathway to decarbonisation. So but in a nutshell, Leader, it looks at the building stock, it looks at what's available, and it suggests way forward to a decarbonised future. Now, figure 1 in the report is on page 178, shows the potential route to decarbonise Bridgend that was devised for us by the Energy Systems Catapult. Now, this work was done in conjunction with the Energy Systems Catapult, Welsh Government, Western Power and Wales and West Utilities. And in essence, what it's saying about Bridgend is to move forward in a decarbonised way. We could use a mixture of district heat networks, electric heat, and also a mix of both. Now, that was approved by Cabinet in February 2019, Leader. But what has happened since that time is the UK government has changed the carbon reduction targets. So whereas before, UK government said that we had to be 80% reduction in our carbon by 2050, it's now saying it wants complete net zero. So what we've had to do is to refresh our local area energy plan to reflect this change. Now, Welsh Government gave us some funding. They gave us a grant of £47,000. And we commissioned the Energy Systems Catapult to do that work for us. So what they looked at is what our Bridgend area could look like in the future, taking into account the need now for net zero by 2050. Now, this new plan doesn't replace the plan we have, it just refreshes it. So the refreshed local area energy plan is attached to your Cabinet report as Appendix 1. It makes some very good reading, actually. It doesn't sound incredibly exciting, but it's an easy to read version of the plan that explains the way forward. And what it does, Leader, it looks at 2 different models. It looks at a model using hydrogen energy, and it looks at a model without it, because it's very clear that hydrogen energy is one of the newest and most innovative energy streams that has come forward in the last couple of years. And if I may just take a few minutes just to explain, it's not in the report, but we've been doing an awful lot of work in the energy team in BCBC to work on a project for hydrogen with our colleagues in Welsh Government and some colleagues in the Japanese government as well. So if I could just explain what hydrogen energy means, Leader. So hydrogen is new and innovative energy form, as we've said. So what happens is that when you electrify water, use an electrification process in water, you separate the hydrogen from the oxygen in the water. And then that hydrogen can then be used as a form of fuel. Now, it can be used as a form of fuel for heating. It can also be combined into cells and be used as a form of power for transportation. And this is something the UK government is currently trialling across the UK, its application for heat and for transport. So this is something that we really want to look at in Bridgend, because as you know, we're quite forward thinking in our energy views. So we want to look at what the hydrogen application could be. And this is what this local area energy plan document demonstrates, with hydrogen and without. And what we'd like to do, Leader, is when we know more about some of the applications in the project, to bring a Cabinet report to you in the future, outlining all the opportunities with hydrogen. So that's the hydrogen piece. And then the second piece to note here is the importance of our district heat network. And that's something that we're implementing in Bridgend itself. We're in phase 1 of that heat network now. We're about to commission somebody to build it out. And again, that has lots of opportunities for expanding that heat network and having zero carbon heat across Bridgend. So this local area energy plan is not intended to be anything other than a potential future decarbonisation pathway. It's just suggesting what the art of the possible is. What we will have to do is to develop projects to test the viability of all these streams, and this will help us inform our decisions for the decades ahead. Now, ultimately, the market will largely decide and dictate the direction of decarbonisation, Leader, based on the choices that the market makes. But what I just wanted to outline is the costs of the refresh were funded by Welsh Government. But what is important to note is that any costs associated with decarbonisation for 2030 will have to be borne by the authority and through grants. And of course, we are currently developing a Bridgend 2030 strategy for decarbonisation, and that's coming in front of Cabinet, hopefully in March later this year, Leader. So if I could take you to section 9 of the report, which is the recommendations. And the recommendation we have today is for Cabinet to please approve the refreshed local area energy plan as set out in Appendix 1. And then what we can do as a team is go away, start looking at the projects and start testing some of these concepts for us in Bridgend. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that. Janine. Councillor Baldwin, please. I think you're on mute, Councillor Baldwin.
Do you know what? I was, thank you. I didn't even need to raise my hand for that one then, but in my eagerness to speak, I didn't put my microphone on. I'm always super excited when it comes to our 2030 agenda and the 2030 programme board and the idea of it's not a detailed roadmap, but I think I'd probably prefer to describe it as a spider graph, because we actually don't know where the agenda for 2030 is going, and even the greatest experts don't know which way the 2030 agenda is going to be going, because there are always going to be new and emerging technologies which will come forward and take over the ones that we thought were the newest and emerging technologies today, which is why the report that we've got in front of us has a with and without hydrogen approach. So really excited with some of the stuff that is happening with the Japanese government and the potential funding that they are going to be bringing towards such a project. That will put us on not just the national stage in Wales, but also across UK government as well. And not forgetting that we are beating off those around the UK city levels because of our skills and expertise. And again, thanks to the team, but in particular to the likes of Mike Jenkins, who is the go-to person ultimately across the region when people want advice and guidance in relation to 2030. So I'm more than happy to recommend and propose those recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin, and it is very, very exciting that we are at the cutting edge of the response to the climate emergency that we have in terms of energy production, distribution and reduction. And that is very evident from this unique role that potentially we will be undertaking jointly with a very prestigious Japanese organisation, and indeed the Japanese government, in terms of piloting and demonstrating the deployment of hydrogen technology. So I'm really pleased to see this plan in front of us today. Do we have a seconder for the recommendations, please?
Happy to, Leader.
Second.
Thank you, colleagues, and everyone in agreement. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Janine. Next report we have from you as our Corporate Director for Communities is on membership, proposed membership of the UK 100. Janine, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the report that's in front of us as item 11 is that we have been invited by the UK 100 Forum to become members of this forum. It's a forum that brings together the most ambitious local leaders in the UK to have their views on decarbonisation and to demonstrate how we get to that net zero target. So I think we have been delighted actually to have been approached to ask in Bridgend, do we want to become members? There are some 60 local authorities that are members already, Leader, but they are, very large cities, including Cardiff, Bristol, Birmingham, Glasgow, Edinburgh. So to be recognised as Bridgend for our contribution towards decarbonisation, it is a coup, really, and we're thrilled to have been invited. Now, membership at this point is by invitation only, and what we have to do is to prove our environmental credentials. We have to have a 2030 net zero plan, which we have coming in front of you in March, Cabinet. We have to report on our carbon emissions regularly, which we will be doing as part of the action plan and showing how we're reducing them. And we've got to commit to using local offsetting practices. And of course, our 2030 strategy is all about that. For instance, we've talked today about a number of things, the use of electric cars, planting trees, the local area energy strategy we've just been through, again, is another ideal example of that. So the UK 100 Forum campaigns on 3 main issues in the UK, on climate change, on clean air, and on green finances. And it also uses a collective voice to advocate for change and a move to net zero. So I think it's something that would benefit Bridgend. But there are also other benefits of being as part of this forum, Leader. There's lots of knowledge sharing between organisations. We can develop solutions collectively to net zero because these are the leaders in the UK on this. As well, we can connect with businesses in the UK because, of course, local authorities can't do this alone, Leader. We need to connect with businesses and look to move that agenda on that side of the fence as well. And also we can demonstrate our collective ambition. So what's next then? Well, we've been invited to join, so we have to prove our credentials to be successfully accepted. Membership is free of this forum, there's no cost associated with it. But of course, we must recognise that delivering a net zero target in Bridgend will have a resource implication. And when we bring that Bridgend 2030 decarbonisation strategy to Cabinet and Council in March this year, we can take you through some of the projects that we aim to achieve in there. So if I may please take you to section 9 of the report, Leader, and it's to approve and accept the invitation for BCBC to join the UK 100 Forum.
Thank you, Janine. Councillor Baldwin, please.
And I'm not going to rehearse some of the stuff I've already said around us being at the sharp end of the stick on this, but ultimately what it also does with our invitation, it means that it puts us at the pinnacle of the Cardiff Capital Region with sharing our skills and experiences with the other local authorities, but happy to move the recommendations, Leader.
And it's a real opportunity, isn't it, for us to share best practice and share the latest technology, and this is one of the many ways that we hope to do that, because to achieve this ambitious target, it will require us to learn quickly and look at the latest technology that continues to change and shift and improve. Is everyone in agreement with the recommendations moved by Councillor Baldwin, please?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Happy to second.
Thank you. And thank you for seconding as well. Thank you, Councillor Patel. Thank you, Janine. And now we have a report on the Transforming Towns Programme Business Fund Implementation 2021 to 2022. Janine, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, the purpose of this report, item 12, is to seek approval to enter into a service level agreement with Rhondda Cynon Taf Council as lead authority for the South East Wales programme under Transforming Towns, the Business Fund. And this Business Fund, Transforming Towns Business Fund, Leader, is to use within our county in the 3 towns of Bridgend, Porthcawl and Maesteg. And out of the local authorities, the 10 local authorities that are in this section, it's Torfaen taking the lead on the programme this time. Now, the background to this is that back in September, you will recall Cabinet received a report on the success of the Transforming Towns programme to date, and to extend that programme until March 22. Now, in that report, Leader, we talked about how so far BCBC had been awarded £1.16 million of grants to 11 different projects within all 3 town centres from Transforming Towns, and we also talked about a further 19 businesses benefiting with money from the COVID-related capital works scheme. And that was, for instance, during COVID for things like outdoor seating and heating, etc., Leader, to enable businesses to be more COVID ready. So we've been very successful to date. Just to take you through a couple of schemes, more notable schemes, just for examples. Up in Maesteg, we had 38 to 40 Commercial Street, which was family value. That was awarded 250,000 to bring that back into use for retail on the ground floor and residential above. We have granted 250,000 to 6 to 7 Talbot Street, which is the new look retail store, for them to expand and to improve the conditions there. And also Zia's, the restaurant in Bridgend in Dunraven Place, they've had 250,000 as well to look to refurbish that restaurant. So we're thrilled with the scheme so far. Now, the current situation we have is Rhondda Cynon Taf being the lead body, and they're going to report on the Transforming Town Fund to Welsh Government, but we are required to sign into a service level agreement, as are all the other local authorities, Leader, to facilitate the grant drawdown. Now, the one thing I would say is this fund is not equally split between all of the local authorities, and it will depend on the merits of each application. However, we've been really successful to date. Out of the 1.6 million of the complete scheme, we've managed to secure 1.1 million so far. So we've been very, very successful in Bridgend. So if I may take you to the recommendations, please, in section 9, it's to delegate authority to enter into the SLA with RCT for the Transforming Town funds, and to approve any extension or amendment to the SLA in the future should it come forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Janine. It's really heartening to hear about the progress that has been made to several buildings that I would describe as landmark buildings. They're all important buildings in our town centres that have benefited or will benefit from major improvements, and those major improvements will secure those buildings, but also make them more attractive and help make our town centres more attractive. So an important strand of our regeneration plans for Maesteg, Bridgend and Porthcawl. Councillor Smith, please.
Sorry, Leader, may I just add that, sorry, I've interjected now.
Okay.
What I didn't say really was for the next year, from March onwards, we've already had 19 applications come in for continuing of the fund from a wider spread of properties in Porthcawl, Bridgend and Maesteg. So it just goes to show that the scheme is incredibly successful for injecting monies into improving our town centre businesses and environment.
Very successful. Thank you, Janine. Councillor Smith as the cabinet member, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. We've had a lot of success with the ancestor schemes which came before this one. Some of these projects take a very long time because very often we're dealing with very sensitive buildings. So Maesteg Town Hall would obviously come into that category, and the Harlequin building in Porthcawl. Hopefully we'll have some really good news soon about the Harlequin, and we're all looking forward to the progress with the Maesteg Town Hall. I think this is a very worthwhile set of funds. and we're always on the lookout for something similar which we could take out of town centres and put into our suburban shopping parades and places like that. So our officers have got very good antennae for picking up potential funding sources of those sorts. So hopefully we'll be able to do that sort of thing as well in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So the recommendations have been moved. Do I have a second for the recommendations, please?
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Everyone in agreement with those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Yeah. And now we'll receive the final report of the Corporate Director for Communities on the proposed renewal of the lease of the Bridgend Cricket Club, Clubhouse and Pavilion at Newbridge Fields, Bridgend, pursuant to Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972. Janine, please.
Thank you, Leader. A year after I was born. Yes, quite an old act, but still a very prominent one, I'm afraid.
Very young act then, very young act.
Very young act. So yes, thank you, Leader. So the purpose of the report is to renew the lease for Bridgend Town Cricket Club for the clubhouse and pavilion, with the addition of a small area of land to the rear of the pavilion, which consists of the cricket practice net, a store and a small parcel of land. So the background to this one, Leader, is that the cricket club occupies a lease for the clubhouse and pavilion. It's been on a 21-year peppercorn rent from 1998. It expired in 2019, but we've been holding over on the lease terms for the club. Now, the tenant does actually have an automatic right to renew the lease, because it's not excluded from the security of tenure provision in the Landlord and Tenants Act. So we have, however, looked at negotiating with Bridgend Town Cricket Club, and they've requested that a small area of land in which their cricket nets are situated and have got planning permission, and a small area of land for storage at the rear of their pavilion is also included in the renewed lease. And it's land that's currently occupied and in use, and we don't think there'll be any detriment to public open space by that, Leader. So the inclusion of the additional land increases the total land on lease to the cricket club from 640 square metres to 1,100 square metres. And this is shown in the appendix to the report as Plan B. Now, the right of public access will be maintained at all times, and this is shown brown on that plan. And we've undertaken a number of consultations. We undertook a consultation with officers within the Council for Green Space and Bereavement and the Community Asset Transfer Officer, and no objections were received. And similarly, we also advertised by notice, public notice, in the Glamorgan Gazette, because that's an important part of disposing of land assets by a council. And we did actually get one objection there, Leader, received. However, it didn't relate to this disposal of the land and inclusion in the cricket club lease, but it related to the management of the pavilion itself. Now, Cabinet will be well aware of the proposal that we put in front of you and we've spoken about to find an individual strategy for the future management of the wider Newbridge Fields area, because Newbridge Fields itself has so many users and is a very large area of space. So what we want to do is to look at the management of this in the round. We want to discuss it with our Community Asset Transfer Board and then bring it back to Cabinet in due course. So the financial implications. So if the land is not to be transferred over to the cricket club, Leader, then we will have to look at the costs of maintaining those cricket nets and or removing them, and that'll have to be taken into account. But if I please take you to the recommendations in section 9, we are very comfortable that the objection that was received didn't refer and didn't make any difference to the land transfer to the cricket club. So in effect, there was no meaningful objection. So the council, we're asking that the Cabinet authorise the transfer of this small additional area of land comprising the cricket nets and storage into the renewed lease for Bridgend Town Cricket Club. That's the recommendation, Leader. But of course, what we would like to do is we will come back to you on another occasion to talk about the wider management implications for the Newbridge Field strategic site. But the recommendation today, please, is to authorise that additional of land be included in the renewed lease. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that. Janine, Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Janine. So just in relation, I'm happy to move the recommendations within the report. Can you just clarify in a situation where you talked about the renewal of the lease, where there has been negotiations? There has been no negotiations with the club in relation to the change of access of groups using that pavilion, though. It is simply just around the inclusion of the cricket nets and the additional public open space. So for want of a bit of extra land, it is a renewed lease on the same terms and conditions.
It is absolutely, Councillor Baldwin. The lease is exactly the same. The only change to the lease is there's a small increase in the land area, which includes the nets, a storage area and a small area behind the pavilion. Apart from that, the access arrangements are exactly the same as they always have been. And that was something that we were very keen to ensure, that we had the full access.
And being very clear again about this, the cricket club have been pushing for the renewal of this lease for some time now.
Yes, they have. And actually, Councillor Baldwin, they have a right to renew that lease as of right. So, but what they wanted to do is to include and clean up the title, if we could say that, to include this additional piece of land. So we've got to that point now where we've made that decision. We've done a consultation. As I said, there was one objection, but I'm afraid it didn't relate specifically to the land. But what we have done is we've looked at that objection, and what we want to do is to look at the management of Newbridge Fields in its entirety moving forward. But for that reason, it doesn't stop this leased area being increased and being passed on.
And we are already in the process of utilising an organisation to determine a report and feedback to us as an organisation around the wider use of Newbridge Fields, which will obviously require future determination. Thanks, Jean. Like I said, I'm happy to approve the recommendations or to propose them.
Yeah, to move the recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Baldwin, and then Councillor Smith, please.
Yes, I'm happy to second that we adopt the recommendations, and I think it's appropriate to say thank you to the cricket club for being willing to be our partners. I think it's very important that this sort of partnership is successful and ongoing. Newbridge Fields is an incredibly important asset to the town of Bridgend and indeed to the county of Bridgend. During the first lockdown, when we were permitted out once a day for our permitted exercise, my wife and I would use the path that goes from the Bailey Bridge and past the clubhouse and then on towards the A48 and back that way. And we did notice when passing the pavilion that they were in need of some storage facilities, and there were some things that we could help them with for tidying up, if you like. So I think this is a very good move. If we'd known we could have just hopped on a train and gone to Downing Street for a rave up, we would have done that. But obviously that wasn't apparent to us at the time. Now, without predetermining the LDP, it is quite possible that Newbridge Fields is going to become even more important as a green lung and as a connecting greenway for new developments, including possibly a new special school, a new special secondary school. It'll be a very important part of that if it happened, and for the benefit of certain listeners and observers, I'm not predetermining anything in saying that, but Newbridge Fields is a treasure which we need to look after, and we need to do this in partnership. The days are gone when the old urban district council could employ a couple of fellas with a a lorry load of tarmac and some shovels to look after places like that. It's got to be much more complicated and much more sophisticated these days, and that's what we're aiming towards.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. And indeed, this is a reminder, actually, Janine, that whilst the phrase community asset transfer is a new one, and we have particular emphasis on that as a principle and a strategy for us as a local authority, this is a reminder that we were transferring assets to the community back in 1998. Not long after we were first formed, and indeed it wouldn't surprise me if the current chief executive was involved in that at the time, given his role in the organisation. And what it shows us is how successful community asset transfers can be, because Bridgend Cricket Club is a thriving club and community with at least 4 adult teams, a whole range of junior and youth teams, with a women's team as well, and has a place in the South Wales Premier League as well. So it's a real success story, and goes to show what can be achieved when assets are transferred to community clubs. So I'm happy, along with colleagues, to support these plans and the recommendation. Is everyone in agreement with the recommendation, please, colleagues? Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
And that is there was the last report from the Corporate Director for Community. So you deserve at least a glass of water now, Janine. And thank you very much for those very positive reports. And we'll move on now to the first report of the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, and it's on the appointment of local authority governors. So over to you, please, Lindsay.
Thanks, Leader. Good afternoon, all. For the benefit of the recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support. So the first report from me this afternoon, Leader, as you've indicated, is to seek approval from Cabinet for the appointment of local authority governors to the school governing bodies listed in paragraph 4 of the report. The background and associate guidance to this report is set out at paragraph 3. And you will note, Leader, that for the 20 local authority governor vacancies at the 16 schools at table at paragraph 4 of this report, all applicants met the approved criteria for appointment as a local authority governor, and there was no competition for the vacancies. The recommended appointments are listed at paragraph 4.1. Leader, for the local authority governor vacancy at Kevin Cribber Primary School, the applicant met the approved criteria for appointment as a local authority governor, and there was no competition for the vacancy. However, as Mr Kendall is currently a parent governor at Kevin Cribber Primary School and is therefore unable to hold 2 positions in the same governing body, the recommendation is to appoint Mr Kendall as a local authority governor, and this is conditional upon the applicant resigning from the existing parent governorship at the school, with the appointment as the local authority governor not taking effect until the resignation is formally received and acknowledged by the chair of the school's governing body and the local authority. Therefore, Leader, I take the recommendation of paragraph 9 in the report, in that Cabinet approves the appointments detailed in paragraph 4.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Lindsay, and I would like to formally move the recommendation, but also thank those people that have volunteered to put themselves forward to sit on governing bodies. It is a busy role, actually, and it does take up a lot. It does take up a lot of time, especially if you are actively involved, which I hope all LEA governors are. So I would like to thank them, and also point out, if there are any other individuals that are interested in being an LEA governor, we do have 47 vacancies, so please put yourself forward or even inquire and we can talk you through what the role entails. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Councillor Patel.
Thank you for moving the recommendations. Councillor Patel, do we have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Everyone in agreement with the recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Lindsay. So we'll now receive your second report as Corporate Director for Education and Family Support on the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to inform Cabinet of the outcome of the consultation with stakeholders on the draft Welsh in Education Strategic Plan. I'm going to refer to it as its commonly known acronym WESP throughout this presentation, Leader. So clearly this is an extremely important report for Bridgend County Borough Council. In developing this paper, officers have worked with a range of delivery partners, and I'm indebted to external partners for their expert assistance in writing this report. I'm also most grateful, and I'm sure that Cabinet members will join me in this, to everyone who's taken part in the consultation. I can confirm that officers have considered the feedback received very carefully in drafting the current version of the WESP, and further information is available in this report and in the appendices. Paragraph 3 of this report sets out the legislative background to the statutory requirement of WESPs, and you note, Leader, that the local authority's WESP must contain proposals on how the local authority will carry out its education functions, the local authority's targets for improving the planning of the provision of Welsh medium education in this area, and an update on progress made to meet the targets contained in the previous WESP. Each local authority's WESP will also support Welsh Government's long-term national ambition for the Welsh language as set out in Welsh Government's Cymraeg 2050, a million Welsh speakers strategy. Leader, you'll be aware that Cabinet first approved the Bridgend Local Authority WESP in March 2014, and it was subsequently approved by the Welsh Government Department for Education and Skills in June 2014. Excuse me. The plan has been reviewed and updated annually prior to seeking approval from Welsh Government. A consultation exercise on the draft WESP was undertaken with stakeholders between the 27th of September and the 19th of December 2021, and the outcome of the consultation has been analysed and a consultation report has been written. The local authority has considered the responses received during the period of the consultation and has amended the draft WESP accordingly. The plan has to be submitted to Welsh Government for approval by the 31st of January 2022. The first 10-year plan will commence on the 1st of September 2022 and expire on the 31st of August 2032. Leader, therefore I take you to paragraph 9, where Cabinet members are asked to note the outcome of the consultation with interested parties as detailed in the attached consultation report, and to approve changes to the draft WESP. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Smith, please.
I move recommendation, Chair, and I thank everyone who took the trouble to contribute to the consultation. You can rest assured that all the comments were noted and considered and where possible incorporated into our proposals, and I look forward to seeing now the response of the Welsh Government.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith, and for moving the recommendations. I would simply add that I'm pleased that once again we have had full engagement, Lindsay, from the Welsh language community and sector in Bridgend, and we welcome that. We very much consider our strategy to be a strategy that we've developed together with partners, and I'm also very proud that we have one such project that's the fruition of the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan on the agenda for today's meeting. It's an item we'll be considering next, actually, and that's just the latest example of significant action we are taking to implement the strategies, because this is the latest strategic plan. We've had previous strategic plans, but we do focus on delivering them out in the community. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations, colleagues?
Happy to second, Leader.
Everyone in agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. So we will now receive the final report of the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, and it's the latest on the 21st Century School Modernisation Programme plans for Bridgend North East. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval from Cabinet to commence a statutory consultation process to make a regulated alteration to enlarge Ysgol Cymraeg Bro Ogw to a 2.5 form entry school with a 90-place full-time equivalent nursery plus an 8-place observation and assessment class on land off Fort Cadfan. The proposal would come into effect from the beginning of autumn term 2025. The background to this report is set out in paragraph 3 of this paper. So, Leader, further to Cabinet approval in December 2017, Welsh Government gave approval in principle for Bridgend's second wave of investment, which at that stage had an estimated programme envelope cost of some 68.2 million. Subsequently, in July 2020, Cabinet approval was received to progress an on-site feasibility at Brackle Hill in respect of the preferred education option for the Bridgend North East scheme. That is a 2.5 form entry Ysgol Cyfun Bro Ogw on the Brackle Hill site, the outcome of which was reported to Cabinet. And as you'll be aware, Cabinet members, having considered the technical complexities and potential costs associated with the development of the school at Brackle Hill, Cabinet determined to discount that site from any future consideration in respect of the Ysgol Cymraeg Bro Ogw, and gave approval for officers to consider alternative options for the replacement school. Of the 3 alternative sites that were considered, the privately owned site at Fort Cadfan, previously considered as part of the options appraisal process, which was cost prohibitive at that time, was regarded as the most suitable for the replacement school in terms of its size and geographical location within the catchment area. Welsh Government approval was sought for the land acquisition of Fort Cadfan to be funded through the Band B programme. This approach was accepted in principle by Welsh Government. This land purchase was progressed and contracts for the purchase of the site have now been exchanged. Therefore, Leader, the acquisition of this land is now legally binding. It's important to note that should a proposal to relocate the school to that site not proceed, there would be limited financial risk to the council based on the likely future onward sales value as detailed within the December 2020 council report. So, Leader, initially in determining the size of the school required, officers had identified the need for 75 nursery places. However, it's recognised there's a need for an additional 15 full-time equivalent nursery places to be provided for rising threes. Also, officers have confirmed the need for an 8-place Welsh medium observation and assessment class to be provided as part of this proposal. Therefore, in order to enlarge Ysgol Cymraeg Bro Ogw, the school organisation code requires that a consultation exercise with the school governing body, staff, parents, pupils and other interested parties is undertaken. This is the first step in the statutory process, and if carried through to completion, it's currently anticipated that this proposal will come into effect from the beginning of autumn term 2025. The consultation document will set out the implications of the proposal. So following this period of consultation, a further report on the outcome of the consultation would be submitted to Cabinet to consider the result of that process, and then Cabinet would need to decide whether to authorise the publication of a statutory notice. This proposal, Leader, is intrinsically linked to the potential alternative use of the residual Ysgol Cymraeg Bro Ogw school building for English medium provision in that area. However, the statutory process in respect of the replacement Bro Ogw building must conclude prior to any proposal being taken forward in this regard. So, Leader, I'll now take you to paragraph 8. £12.6 million has been allocated in the capital programme for this project, and the Welsh Government intervention rate for this project is 65%. With the additional 15 places for Horizon 3s, this would need to be funded from BCPC capital and would form part of the total project costs. As you're aware, Leader, contractual inflation and the impact of COVID-19 may have a detrimental impact on the scheme costs. However, this will be monitored and reviewed regularly through the course of the project, and any revenue implications resulting as a consequence of moving sites will not be known until the scheme is developed further. Any changes to the total cost of the scheme or council contributions will be reported back to Cabinet and Council in due course. So therefore, Leader, I take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9, in that Cabinet is recommended to give approval to commence the statutory consultation process to make a regulated alteration to enlarge Ysgol Cymraeg Bro Ogw on land off Fort Cadfan. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that report, Lindsay. Councillor Smith, please.
I'm happy to formally move that we accept the report, as long as everyone listening to this discussion appreciates that nothing I say should be taken as being predetermined. This is an ambition. The that we've got, but it's going to consultation, and in Bridgend we listen to consultations and we react to them in a genuine and an open and transparent way. But it is a wonderful ambition to have to put a modern 21st century Welsh medium school in that location. That location will serve an area of the county that needs this provision. We don't have catchment areas for Welsh medium schools or faith schools. Maybe for Welsh medium that will come one day, but at the moment what we have to do is we have to look for the areas where there is a need and do our human best to satisfy that need. So we're looking at Porthcawl as another area which needs a gap to be plugged with this sort of provision. So this is a very exciting possibility, and it's also very exciting as well that we might be able to use Bro Ogwr for English medium. So there we have bilingualism in a nutshell, catering for the needs and wishes of pupils and parents in those different ways, and aiming for the Welsh Government's ambitions for the language over the next couple of decades.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. You identify that growing demand, growing need in the northeast of Bridgend for additional places, and this would be a major expansion of the number of places, and we have experienced in the past, haven't we, Lindsay, that sometimes places are oversubscribed at Bro Ogwr. We're unable to meet all the demand that there has been, and obviously this would address that. It would also enable us to open for the first time an observation assessment class at the school. I know that would be very much welcomed, and of course is an important strand in our WESP that we support children with additional learning needs too. And finally, very exciting proposals around a 90-place full-time equivalent nursery. We know that the early years is critical to the success of Welsh medium education, especially for children from English speaking only homes, and we know that the majority of children that are in Welsh medium provision in Bridgend are from homes where Welsh is not spoken, and need to benefit from that full-time nursery education. But of course, as Councillor Smith has said, we will now go out to consult formally, and we look forward to the views of the schools, of the parents, of the governors, of staff, and of course of the young learners themselves. It always elicits important information that we can reflect in the detail of the proposals going forward. But I think it's fair to describe the level of support from the school and the community at the moment, the school community, as being high informally for this proposal, but obviously there'll be in-depth consultation now. So, do I have a seconder for those recommendations, please?
I'm happy to.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Thank you, Councillor Gebbie. Everyone in agreement? Thank you, colleagues. So that was our final report to Corporate Director for Education and Family Support. We will now, so you can have a glass of water now, Lindsay.
Thank you.
And we've now got a report to the Chief Officer, Legal, Regulatory, Human Resources, and of course our Monitoring Officer on reports, information reports for noting. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. This will be a very quick report. As you're aware, it's an administrative report to inform Cabinet of the information reports that have been published since your last meeting. Cabinet will find the details of those reports at paragraph 4.1. So you have the Treasury Management Q3 report and then the Regulation of Investor Powers Act 2000. Both are appended to documents. They've also been circulated to all elected members and they'll be placed on the BCBC website for information purposes. I therefore ask Cabinet to note the publication of those documents. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Patel, please.
I'm happy to move the recommendations. Obviously, they come before us on a routine basis, and it's important for us to put this into the public domain. So happy to move those recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patel. Do we have a second there?
I am happy to second those recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. And is everyone in agreement with we note the report?
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Thank you, colleagues. Now, I do not have any urgent items. However, I do want to make an announcement before the end of the Cabinet meeting. It's a brief announcement. A meeting of the Cabinet Committee for Corporate Parenting was due to take place on Thursday, the 12th of January last week. However, this meeting had to be postponed as a key item of business for the agenda was not ready for circulation to meet the original meeting date, coupled with the fact that there are invitees on the committee, vacancies on the committee that will need to be filled now through the overview and scrutiny process, and it's important that those vacancies are filled so that those champions can attend that meeting. The meeting has therefore been delayed until a date yet to be agreed in mid to late February, and of course Democratic Services officers will try to ensure that as many members are available to attend that meeting as possible. Members, of course, of the committee. The chairperson, following consultation with the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing and the proper officer for committees, has agreed to this postponement. Members and officers will be updated with a revised date and time for this meeting in the immediate future as soon as this has been finalised. We will now consider a proposal to exclude the public in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972 and subsequently amended by the Local Government Order of 2007 due to exempt information in the minutes. So I'll ask the monitoring officer to explain that to colleagues, please.
Thank you, Leader. The item before you in the exempt session are approval of minutes. There isn't a substantive report for you to consider. So what Cabinet need to consider is that you've already determined that the matters being discussed in the minutes should be dealt with in exempt session previously. So for today's purposes, you need to apply the test to see whether those circumstances still apply as of today's date. Once Cabinet have determined that, they can move into the exempt session if they think those circumstances still apply, and then obviously approve the minutes in the usual fashion.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Councillor Gebby, you happy to support that?
I am happy to support that for obvious reasons. I think it's really important that we have the attendees with us as well.
Thank you, Councillor Gerbie. So we will now formally exclude the public from this part of the meeting following application of that public interest test. And of course, in due course, these minutes will become available to the public, but not at this stage. So